I'm back with meteorologist Dr. Neil Frank, the former director of the National Hurricane Center. Dr. Frank, I want to talk about CO2, carbon dioxide. Now, everybody knows, we all learn in fourth grade that we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. Right. For plants, I guess it's the opposite, right? They take carbon dioxide, they release oxygen. Now, so we learn about carbon dioxide as part of this natural process. Right. And then we turn to politics and we find these climate change activists acting like carbon dioxide is like the worst thing on the planet. The less the better. We got to get rid of all the carbon dioxide. So talk about carbon dioxide and the role it plays in the ecosystem and why not only do we need it, but we might need more of it.
Right. Well, let's start by making this statement. There's no dispute that the Earth has warmed the last 150 years. As we have said before, the debate is whether carbon dioxide is responsible for that.
Right.
I'm of the opinion, and many credible skeptics are of the opinion that carbon dioxide is not a major factor in the Earth's temperature. There's a number of reasons for that. Number one, it's a very minor gas. Not 4% of the atmosphere. Not 0.4% of the atmosphere, it's 0.04% of the atmosphere. Now, the football stadium in Dallas holds 100,000 people. If you assign a molecule of air to every one of those seats, there'd be 70,000 nitrogen seats, 20,000 oxygen seats. There'd only be 40 of carbon dioxide. So it is a very minor gas. And we're saying that 4 seats in the football stadium in Dallas will control the atmosphere. No, I don't think so. Nor do I think that 0.04% of the atmosphere is going to control the Earth's temperature. So that's the skeptic's position. We don't believe that carbon dioxide is a major factor. But if we can demonize fossil fuels that are producing carbon dioxide, then we can achieve a goal that the activists would like to achieve.
We'll come back to that goal, but let's stay with the carbon dioxide for a little bit. Now, I learned in science class that there is something called the greenhouse effect, which is that as you increase the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, there is a warming effect. And you're not denying that. You're saying, of course, that's true.
Absolutely.
But you're saying that if you look at the volume of gases in the atmosphere, the carbon dioxide is so infinitesimal that the warming effect is not significant.
90% of the warming comes from water vapor, not carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
And we're now beginning to understand that there are cyclic patterns of the water vapor in the atmosphere that might be 60-year cycles. We have a lot of clouds for 30 years and then fewer clouds for 30 years. And that may have an impact on the Earth's temperature. We don't know.
Let's talk about the benefits of CO2. Let's look at this graph here.
Well, let's start by, again, the blue line would indicate the Earth's temperature from 1880. And remember, we talked about the Earth has a 60-year cycle. It cools for 30 years and warms for 30 years. And that would be indicated in the light blue line. And you can see that here in this 80s and 90s, there is good correlation. But just prior to that, there was no correlation.
Okay, correlation between carbon dioxide and Earth warming.
They were both rising at the same time. But in the 35-year period before that, the carbon dioxide, the Earth's temperature was cooling and the carbon dioxide levels were rising. Not shown here, but if we go to 2000, the Earth's temperature has leveled off and carbon dioxide continues to increase.
And then you notice the same trend as you go backward.
Exactly.
So here you find in this period, 1910 to 1940, more carbon dioxide, more warming.
Not much carbon dioxide.
Not much more. That's true. Yeah.
And there was a significant warming during this time. Matter of fact, in the 1940s, there's less ice in the Arctic than there is today. That was a major warming period. And then we went into that cool period when you arrived over here.
That's right. Okay. Let's look at the next graph because it really struck me very interesting. And that is, you say, can anything good come from CO2? So let's talk about that.
Well, a professor at the University of Arizona has done some fascinating work in correlating the carbon dioxide with plant growth. And he's finding, and there are literally hundreds of studies on this, okay? If you take 45 of the plants that feed 95% of the earth, you'll find that if we have a doubling of carbon dioxide, in other words, from 400 parts per million to 800 parts per million, there would be at least a 50% increase in most of those plants that feed the earth. And in some cases, I don't know why, carrots and turnips, it gets up to 80%. So there is an increase of 80%. Now, remind me now, we're going to double carbon dioxide. Maybe we're going to do that by 2050. And we're going to see, in some cases, an 80% in the increase in plant growth. And in most plant growth, it'd be 45 to 50%. You can change that into dollars. And if you do that, the estimate is that we would add $10 trillion to the economy of the United States just because of the increase in carbon dioxide.
And what you're also saying, if I can extrapolate, is that for a world that's growing in population, more mouths to feed, right? You're saying that a boosting of the productivity of the plant population of the earth is probably not a bad thing in order to be able to feed the world.
Now, one of the things I like to ask activists, what is the optimum level of carbon dioxide? Has anyone ever asked that question? Well, it's not 400 parts per million. Nurseries that can control their environment for decades have boosted the levels up to 1,200, to 1,500, because they get this plant improvement in plant growth. So what is the optimum level? I think that we have been living in a carbon dioxide starved atmosphere. And maybe 1,200, 1,500 would be the more optimum level.
Fascinating. So what you're saying really is that the activist assumes that the level that we have now is like the perfect level. That's the level that like God made it at that level. So therefore, if the level is increased, that'll be horrific. It's bound to have catastrophic effects. And you're saying there's no reason to think that. There's no scientific basis for that statement.
Now, one of the things that I can tell you, if the carbon dioxide levels ever drop below 150, all plants die. Now, for the last 10,000 years, we've been just above that level in the 200 range. We've been just above the critical level, 200. At times, the carbon dioxide levels drop down to 180. That is really, really scary. So maybe 1,200, 1,500 would be the more optimum level.
You alluded to this, so when we come back in our last segment, I want to ask you, if all of this is right and there's no real basis, and these are guys who want to change the whole world economy based on this, what's their agenda? We'll be right back.